I tell you what,
it's not like the olden days.
I'm Rosie.
I'm Jay.
And today we're going to talk to you about Earthworm Jim. Nearly all of it the cartoon show, which was based on a computer game, which I've never played, never seen a walkthrough on YouTube. But a couple of things that I do happen to know about it might be relevant. But the cartoon, anyway, was on television from 1995 to 1997 over 2 series. And it's one of those things that I was finding on TV one weekend morning when I was hanging about the house thinking, I wonder if there's anything good on. And I found this first series of Earthworm Jim, and for some reason it spoke to me, but it's very weird, isn't it? The premise is a bit difficult to explain. Earthworm Jim is an earthworm who's ended up with this super suit, and it's basically his whole body that he uses apart from his head because it's got legs and everything. And so he's a superhero, and it's not unlike Banana Man, I suppose, in that it's a sort of parody of superhero stuff. And so there are these super villains who do various evil things just for the sake of it, for the sake of making a superhero show. And it's one of those ones where they're aware that they're on the television, which can fall very flat and be inappropriate, like I was complaining about it with Fantastic Max in that podcast, and also I was saying at times they use it inappropriately in things like Tiny Toon Adventures. But funnily enough, Earthworm Jim does that appropriately and well.
Yes, that's one thing that fits in with the manic and random style of the cartoon, which is prevalent, and it just works. But if you don't integrate it carefully, like they sometimes don't in Tiny Toons, or it shouldn't be there at all, like in Fantastic Max, you can go very wrong with it. It's one of the children's shows that Channel 4 took it upon themselves to buy and show in this country, and they did come up with some good ones that CITV and CBBC didn't seem to want. I remember getting up early on Sunday mornings to record the second series when that was first on. I just got a TV aerial in my bedroom, and then we would watch it on the video later, which was great fun. I think I picked up bits of the first series while you were watching it and thought, well, this is very strange and random, but I think I enjoyed it. Thought it was funny. Random, madcap humour. Not the kind of thing audiences seem to like nowadays, according to Nicktoons, who showed it a few years ago once and then never did again. Perhaps they didn't find a modern audience as they were hoping.
That doesn't surprise me. It's not going to appeal to you if you like things that sort of make any sense.
I sometimes say nowadays, or this century, cartoons always have to start with a 3 or 5 part origin story, which they didn't used to. We just used to come in and get used to the premise and understand it in our own way, and you very much have to do that with Earthworm Jim.
And I was commenting only the other day over the festive period, which is when we're recording this, that it's been a long time since they made a Disney movie that doesn't start with the protagonist as a child setting up their motivation for the entire film. So, Earthworm Jim isn't like that. In the theme tune it goes, Earthworm Jim, the soil he did crawl, Earthworm Jim, a super suit did fall, and you see him getting landed on by the super suit, thus ending up inside it, and then he's this superhero, and actually if you watch the series you can pick up bits of his origin as you go, and you think, oh yes, that fits in with what we know. But if you're the sort of person who's thinking, well, why is this happening, who are these people, you're probably not going to get that far with it.
Yes, it's much better to credit your viewers with a bit of intelligence and introduce to them, so that's how the super suit got there. It was supposed to be being delivered to Queen Slug for a buck, and it fell down and landed on Earthworm Jim. A bit like in He-Man, with various bits of flashbacks to the first time Cringer became Battle Cat and things. Fill it in along the way. The audience is already quite used to the premise because they've seen it and placed it comfortably in their minds using their common sense.
Yes, and the characters have names like Queen Slug for a butt, which should tell you quite what the show is like if you didn't know already and you haven't picked it up from what we said so far. television aerial in your bedroom? Why didn't we just get Sky Multi-Room? But anyway, perhaps we'd better talk about the characters. Obviously, there is Earthworm Jim, so we'll start with him, and then the other protagonists. He's voiced by Dan Castellaneta, and I think it's pretty much as close as you'll hear to his normal voice, which I don't think you get on The Simpsons, do you, with Homer?
No.
And his other characters, or Hey Arnold with Grandpa, and I don't know what else he's been in. But he's very good. I suppose he's used to doing slightly bizarre humour and delivering his comedy lines very well, which is why they thought of him for this. And one thing he does is a lot of parodying classic superhero delivery and calling the villains by kind of Batman-style address, like you nefarious fiend and that kind of thing.
And he has his special name for his sidekick, Peter Puppy, calling him Fuzz Buddy, a bit like, the Boy Wonder or something like that.
That's right. But the thing is that he's actually a little bit inept as a superhero, although he does alright, doesn't he? And his plans often do work.
And his go-to is to whip out his ray gun and shout, "Eat dirt," and shoot everything in sight, which often works at the end.
Yes, I was thinking, am I about to say he's completely incompetent and can't do anything and relies on his allies? But that's not quite right, is it? It's just that he's a bit sort of fumbling and stumbles along the way and says some stupid things, like when he's finding out that Queen Slug for a butt is responsible for something that's happened. I think it was kidnapping Santa, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And somebody's telling him it was some insect with a butt the size of a Macy's Day Parade balloon. And he goes, "Oh, Rush Limbaugh." And then Peter Puppy pops up going, "No, Jim, Queen Slug for a butt." And then they go and sort her out over the course of the episode.
They make good use of humour like that with Jim, but it's true what you were saying about how it wouldn't be fair to class him as an inept superhero, because when they do that episode where the Council of Superheroes decides that Peter is the brains of the outfit and should be the superhero and Jim should be demoted to sidekick and he's actually useless, it doesn't quite wash with us, does it? So that just proves it's not really a phenomenon in the show, it's just an occasional joke where Jim's a bit stupid for fun.
Yes, and Peter is a bit more on the ball, like in that scene I just described. Before we talk about Peter, perhaps we should briefly mention the character Snot, because I think that's going to be quite quick, and also because Snot lives in the super suit, which you've just been talking about, in this sort of pouch at the back, and I think they refer to him as he is in fact genderless, so typically anything that has no discernible gender, like an animal or something, everyone will go around saying it's a he, but enough of my feminist agenda. He is actually Snot. When they want to say what he is, they refer to him as a booger, I think. And it's very strange. I don't know if he had a bit more of a function in the video game.
Well, I think he must have done, because he has this counterpart in the video game, Major Mucus, who doesn't even make it into the TV show. Major Mucus lives in Psychro's suit, Snot lives in Jim's. You can tell it's something from the computer game that really they probably shouldn't have bothered bringing over at all, because it doesn't really work or add much.
Yes, he doesn't exactly speak, does he? But it makes sort of noises, and sometimes he seems to be speaking to Jim. There's that bit where he's making a suggestion, and we're thinking, oh, what is it? And Jim goes something about how it's a good idea, but I don't think I could fit that much marmalade in my mouth, and it's got absolutely nothing to do with what's going on. So there's another example for you of the kind of random humour, but we thought that was hilarious when we first heard it.
Yes.
But he's in some episodes. There are some two bits, I think. Perhaps they thought it was going to be a running gag, but I think it only happens twice, where Snot and Peter are not with Jim, and Peter says, "Thanks for taking the time to talk about my feelings, Snot." And the one I can remember is where he's made up a puppet play about his feelings about Jim being in prison, and it ends up with him pouring jelly and mustard and stuff all over the table. Snot's just sitting there, and sometimes it's not on the adventure with Jim, suggesting something about him putting marmalade in his mouth. But then after a while, he sort of disappears, and we don't see him for a long time in Series 1. And in Series 2, we don't see him at all.
Which is not at all surprising, because he's not really a sustainable character. Of course, as part of his role of Earthworm Jim, Dan Castellaneta also does the voice of Evil Jim, which is the same voice he uses for the tarantula on Fievel's American Tales, actually.
Oh, is it? I don't remember that one. I do sometimes think you can hear Krusty the Clown in Evil Jim.
Yes, and he's rather a fun character, and he first appears in that episode you were just talking about with Snart and the puppet play and talking about your feelings. And I always used to find that he was in it less than I expected, Evil Jim. He's in a couple of episodes in the first series.
And I think just his origin episode, and then he has cameos at the beginning and end of one other one, doesn't he?
That's right, and then he's only in the one episode in Series 2 where they do streamline, cut down how many baddies appear in every episode. But of the 10 episodes, Evil Jim is only the main baddie in one of them. He doesn't have a cameo in any others. And I think he's rather a fun villain.
Quite recently, I was saying it would make a certain amount of sense if Major Mucus lived in his suit, wasn't I?
That's right, they could have introduced him.
He's an evil twin in the sense that Sabrina has her evil twin, which we talked about in the Sabrina podcast some time ago. Not so much a twin as a doppelganger, but he's created by Jim making a photocopy of himself on a photocopier, messing about with it sort of thing, and then it ending up getting covered in nuclear waste, bringing the photocopy to life.
I'm trying to think of what superhero and evil twin that is like, and I think the only example I can think of is Spider-Man and Venom, where an evil version of Spider-Man is made by some weird force touching him and recreating him.
Yes, a bit I always remembered from watching the first series, which did not get recorded except a couple of episodes towards the end, was Jim realising that he has an evil twin and saying, of course, superheroes and evil twins go together like peanut butter and evil peanut butter. And I always thought that was very funny. Of course, if you know anything about Americans, you'd expect him to say jelly. But yes, the reason Jim's in prison and Peter has to do this puppet play is because he sees Evil Jim on the CCTV and in fact turns himself in. I think he does have an unerring sense of right and wrong and is very honest and has all the ideals of a superhero. I also remembered Evil Jim explaining to him, everything you hate I love and everything I love you hate. You know, when you clean your teeth and then drink orange juice, Earthworm Jim says, ooh, I hate that. Of course, Evil Jim loves it, and I always related to that because when I was very young, one day, I remember this, I cleaned my teeth and I couldn't see any reason not to have a drink of Ribena, and it was horrible.
Then you found the reason very quickly, didn't you?
Exactly. So there we are. He's green, I guess because of the nuclear waste. It's a black and white photocopier, whereas Earthworm Jim, is of course pink. He has sort of crooked teeth because when Jim puts his head on the photocopier, it sort of makes his teeth spread out. And I'd forgotten that aspect of the original episode, actually. So when I saw it on this repeat on Nickelodeon, I thought, that explains why Evil Jim looks exactly like what he looks like. This cameo episode that I mentioned, he's trying to kill them all in this sort of Centurion tank, isn't he? All the goodies at the beginning. And then something else comes up and Peter and Earthworm Jim have to run off and deal with it. And then they come back going, oh no, we didn't deal with Evil Jim. And then he's chatting up Princess what's her name? I guess we'll talk about next. Push Peter back one more place, and she's really into it, and it's a sort of funny joke, and that's it for Evil Jim in Series 1. And then in Series 2, as you said, he has this one episode where he invents this gun where you shoot people, and it makes an opposite twin of them, but actually it doesn't work, and he gets a mail order one. And yes, he goes around making evil duplicates of Jim, Peter, and Princess what's her name. And I was thinking about that, actually, when I was saying, actually, Jim does manage to come up with good plans and come through in the end. I was thinking specifically of the one where he gets Evil Jim's opposite twin making gun, and Evil Jim goes, hey, you! thing-taker guy, which we thought was a very funny insult, very accurate too, and shoots it at Evil Jim and creates a whole bunch of Jims who then defeat Evil Jim. And that's an interesting episode because it makes evil twins for Peter and the princess, and then as a sort of precursor for making a whole bunch of Jims with the gun gets accidentally shot around the kind of club where the supervillains hang out and makes good twins for them. So you get the idea of the sort of thing that happens. But let's talk about Princess What's-Her-Name, because I said we would, and when I said some things about the video game might be relevant, I was really thinking about her because I was reading about the video game, and in the video game, Princess What's-Her-Name is a victim, and the object of the game is to rescue her. Whereas in the cartoon, she is a strong female woman with interesting motivation and skills and calls herself a warrior, in fact. An interesting thing is that in the theme tune sequence, she's like in a cage, and then Jim's trying to rescue her, and then at the end she kind of falls out of the sky and he catches her, and then all the other characters come and he catches them and they make it fall over. But in the sequence anyway, that's very much representing the role she had in the video game, perhaps trying to encourage fans of the video game to keep watching, making them think it's going to be like the video game. And she's got some brains as well and helps out Jim and Peter sometimes.
She's the closest thing there is to another one of the regular good guys, as well as Jim and Peter. And if you watch series 2, you might quite reasonably come away thinking, yes, they're the three goodies who hang around together. But you get that quite infrequently in series 1. Might be a bit of a surprise, like seeing Snot there, if you're very familiar with series 2, and come back to series 1. She's really only in it much when it's about Insectica, where she's from, and Queen Slug for about her evil twin sister. She doesn't really take a lot of interest in other stuff in the first series.
In the episode with Evil Jim's opposite twin garden I was just mentioning, when her evil duplicate is made, she's going, just what I need, another evil twin. And they look alike, but she and Queen Slug for a butt do not look alike. And in the season 1 episode where you learn all about her origin, the narrator guy explains that Queen Slug for a butt by Insectican standards is very beautiful, and she's like this massive insect with a butt the size of a Macy's Day Parade balloon and 4 eyes and stuff like that. And the princess is hideously malformed and ugly, and she looks like a sort of little human girl when she pops out of her pod being born, and then a sexy woman when she's grown up, which is why Jim fancies her, raising some questions about exactly what the super suit can do if you've got a dirty mind. She has insect features like sort of big bulgy eyes, and she's got black and yellow striped legs and little wings on her back, and you're agreeing with me when we were watching it, it's not always clear whether her design is her body or her clothes, is it?
That's very true.
Especially as her feet are sort of boots with high heels. But yeah, she has sort of cameos in series 1, like the one I was mentioning with Evil Jim. She'll like pop up in some of the random bits, and then there's this one episode which is all about her overthrowing her sister and becoming the Queen of Insectica. And then yes, in season 2 she does do probably about half the actual superheroing with them as a main protagonist. There are some where they're not with her. She's voiced by Cass Sushi, perhaps I should have said. Well, I've said it now, and I think she does a pretty good job. I suppose it's not really the kind of ship you can really get into. It's obviously completely unrequited. People debate that for hours to do with ships on TV that they're interested in or that they don't want. Oh, she fancies him back. No, she doesn't. But I think quite clearly the princess doesn't fancy Jim back, does she?
She doesn't really engage with the whole concept. She doesn't really understand the idea of what he's trying to get at.
Yes, in this Insectica Series 1 episode I keep talking about, the narrator explains that she's dedicated her life to becoming a trained warrior so that she can overthrow her sister and bring justice to Insectica, and he says that she ends up with no concept of love, romance and that kind of thing. Other times, Jim's like trying to come onto her, and she seems to be finding him a bit annoying. Like, in these love-hate relationships they have nowadays, where the girl just hates the guy and wants him to F off. But anyway, whichever way you cut it, I don't think they're soulmates and are going to end up happily ever after. Now, we've talked about Peter quite a lot, Peter Puppy, and he too has an origin episode, this one in Series 2, where it's explained that he's a regular puppy, and one day he dares to face a running vacuum cleaner and gets transported to another dimension, which actually turns out to be the planet Heck, which we'll tell you a bit more about that, I'm sure, where Evil the cat releases this evil spirit that gives him anthropomorphism and, as he calls it, intelligence, and a nifty shirt. He's got this shorts and blue shirt costume that he goes around in, and I never really thought about this at the time, but it's quite funny actually that this comes with him being anthropomorphized. But of course, the problem is that this evil spirit makes him do a kind of an Incredible Hulk thing and transform into a monster whenever he's scared or hurt, as Jim puts it. But unlike the Incredible Hulk, the monster is just evil and will start attacking Jim and trying to chew him to pieces.
And there's a potentially interesting development there, which they only touch on a couple of times, where Peter might learn to control the monster and use it for good. Won't let you hurt Jim! He manages to get some control over it once in each series, and I sometimes think and or say if it was going to be a virtual season or special of it, that would be one of the interesting things I'd like to explore.
Yes, although I don't think anyone's realistically got a whole virtual season of Earthworm Jim in them.
No, that would be very tricky.
Who's the voice of Peter? I've forgotten his name.
Peter is voiced by Jeff Bennett.
Yes.
Who was mentioned in the previous regular podcast that we did as the voice of Fadil in The Mummy Secrets of the Magi. And I promised this was going to be a kind of second in the double bill of the Jeff Bennett and Jim Cummings podcast series. Jeff Bennett also voices the narrator in Earthworm Jim. And when I was reading this before we watched it last time, I thought, is that right? Is he really Jeff Bennett as well? He sounds quite different from Peter. He has a good narrator voice that he does. But I think Fadil in Secrets of the Magi is actually the link between Peter and the narrator. I can kind of hear both of them in him, so I believe that now.
Yes, the narrator does a not particularly good English accent, but it works well for the show, which is a bit bizarre anyway. In fact, it's extremely bizarre. It takes him a couple of episodes to get the hang of Peter's voice, actually.
Oh, doesn't it just?
So when you hear him in the first 2 episodes, you can believe it's a guy who could do that voice, that narrator voice as well. And quite a fun thing is that the characters interact with the narrator, which can be very funny. And before that, it was utilised on Where's Wally, wasn't it? The characters having amusing conversations with the narrator and unpicking and objecting to what he said and that kind of thing.
Yes, very, very similar use of narrator, and I think that narrator on Where's Wally is actually Jim Cummings, so that should be included in this series of podcasts as well, but we're not doing one on Where's Wally.
No, I don't think we have enough to say, but an example anyway of that is the narrator saying that Peter, Jim and the princess are watching TV like, I can't remember what adjective he uses, ordinary Americans. And the princess goes, I'm not American, I'm from another planet, remember? And he goes, ask me if I care, and that kind of thing. You get sort of acerbic with the characters sometimes.
And then I think we thought towards the end of the second series they were taking that a bit far, where he was refusing to do the narration, make up your own narration. And then he's on the phone to his agent at one point saying, get me off the show. They run out of funny interactions to do with the characters.
Yes, towards the end of the second series we were noticing that they were sort of running out a little bit of ideas for him and other things as well.
I think it's definitely the right place to stop there.
A very good use of him is just to tell us where Jim is, because he goes around in space on this space rocket, which also goes inside his suit. The narrator's saying as if it's the most ordinary thing in the world. Meanwhile, on the planet of creamy foods, the planet of easily scared people.
I love that one.
That kind of thing.
Planet of man-eating socks.
You can make quite a good list of funny planets. Of course, there's a very good scene with the easily scared people involving a villain we haven't mentioned yet, Bob the Killer Goldfish, where he's going up to them saying, "Hello, I have come to conquer your planet." And they go, "Ah, we surrender." And then a bit later in the show, Jim and Peter are at their secret headquarters and this alarm goes off. Peter's saying, "What the heck is that?" And it's the plot development alarm, which is this kind of humour that we were talking about that can easily fall very, very flat and be annoying. And the plot development alarm shows you a copy of the script. And it's gone, "Bob, hello, I have come to conquer your planet. Aliens, we surrender." Peter goes, "Who writes this stuff?" It makes much more sense in context, but yes, it does look like a stupid script, doesn't it?
Scripts taken out of context usually are really stupid. When I was first recording Earthworm Jim on the Sunday mornings on my new TV aerial, and I saw the first episode of Series 2 was called The Origins of Peter Puppy, I thought, oh good, that'll be interesting. And indeed I did enjoy it. I like Peter's running gag where he doesn't like haggis, or he does like it, but when he discovers he's eating it, it makes him absolutely sick, the idea that it's the heart, lungs and liver of a sheep boiled in his own stomach. I like his little mantra to stop him turning into a monster, which sometimes works. "I must not fear, fear is the mind killer, fear is the little death that brings total oblivion." And it's rather fun when he uses that to help Jim and the princess overcome their fears in the dream world.
By the way, that man who was on a game show recently, what was it, Pointless, who said fear is the mind killer, and everyone went, "Oh, isn't that a clever saying, you and your sayings, I know where you got that from, you plagiarised it off Peter Puppy." You were telling me recently, I don't know if you'll agree that this is right, that when you were a bit younger at least, you weren't so keen on the first series format, which is more random than the second series, not least because the beginning, before the theme tune, has absolutely nothing to do with the rest of the plot, whereas it does in Series 2, and also there's, just after the first adverts, it would have been in America, I suppose, a sort of couple of minutes of one of the villains, who's not in that particular episode main bit, doing something else. Like, for example, in this Insectica episode, it's Psychro trying to find a job and doing them all wrong because he, wants to blow everybody up and stuff. And then he becomes a gym teacher, and the person comes up to him going, "Oh, you can't be a gym teacher." He's chasing them with his gun. And I think you can see where this one's going, actually. It's not one of the better ones. But he's saying, "Why? Is it because I'm too cruel?" And they're saying, "No, it's because you're too nice." And that kind of thing. There's this one with Evil the cat going and trying to get off with this cat in the cat food commercial, and also recruit her to help him destroy the universe, not just get his rocks off with her, and it turns out to be a man in a cat outfit and that kind of thing. Whereas Series 2 has a bit before the music that introduces either the events of the episode or the theme of the episode, like the Origins of Peter Puppy, we get him successively turning into a monster, and then after the music, Jim introduces what they're going to do by saying, "This turning into a monster thing has gone on long enough," and then that's what they do for the whole episode, and there's no other bit with another character. And you were telling me you like that better.
It's a much more traditional format for an episode of something, which I guess makes it less unique and madcap in Series 2, but I was pleased when I was recording that first episode of Series 2. It was all one continuous plot, and I thought, oh, are we really just going to have Evil the Cat as the villain in this episode? I like that.
Although, as you say, the first series format does fit in very much with the wacky style and feel of the whole thing.
Well, you asked me when we were watching it, do you prefer the first series now? Because I think we were finding it slightly funnier and slightly that they were reaching a bit for ideas in the second series. And I said, well, 10 years ago I'd have said I definitely liked the second series much more. But now, I don't know, perhaps for overall enjoyment, the first series is rather better and fresher and more unique. But I think they are both very funny and feel very much like a fresh and engaging TV show.
Perhaps we'd better go through the villains besides Evil Jim now. I think we've mentioned nearly all of them. Let's start with the one I don't think we've mentioned, actually, which is Professor Monkey for a Head. And I know this, he's voiced by Charlie Adler. Is Charlie Adler the monkey as well as the Professor?
Yeah.
And it's not really explained how it happened. And if you want an explanation for that sort of thing, you don't want to watch Earthworm Jim, in which case you don't want an explanation anyway because you're not interested. But he says that he has a monkey grafted to his skull. I think they share a brain, don't they?
Yes.
You can infer that it's the result of some sort of experiments that he's done being a professor. On the other hand, maybe it's just some kind of weird alien, I don't know. But he walks around, and this monkey's like on the top of his head with its feet in the air, you know, and they have the same eyes as well as the same brain and the same skull, if you can imagine that. And a couple of times, like when the professor gets shrunk for some reason, the monkey gets to go on the bottom, as it were, and be in control. Another time is in this fantasy sequence where the monkey said he wanted a bedtime story and the professor's telling him Little Monkey Riding Hood, and the monkey is being Little Red Riding Hood, and the professor's all wrapped up in the red hood, if you can imagine that. Sometimes the professor's working for the Queen, isn't he?
And it turns out, of course, that he built Jim's supersuit for her as we get into the origins.
And sometimes he's working for himself. And what is he trying to do when he's working for himself? Take over the world?
Yes, usually.
Like when he gets everybody to use aftershave and products like that that makes them turn into apes. It's so that his monkey can communicate with them and take over the world. And then Peter actually points out that can't be right, apes and monkeys aren't the same thing, and he says he feels he's a monkey trapped in the body of an ape and got a tail grafted on, which isn't funny anymore, is it? Because he's actually taking the piddle out of sex changes. So there you are, that shows how it was the olden days and attitudes have changed. And is he your least favourite villain? Or is it Psychro?
I think Psycho's my least favourite villain because they don't really find a definitive place for him in the setup of the show, really. He seems like a slightly lost part of the computer game to me, Psycho. Less so than Snot, but still rather he had that aspect about him. I like some bits with Professor Monkey for a Head. I like it when it's revealed the monkey's name is Monkey Professor for a Head.
Makes sense, doesn't it?
I like the bit where he's pretending to be this laundromat owner for various reasons and has covered up the monkey, and then this banana skin falls out of his hair while Earthworm Jim's there, and Professor goes, "Sorry, head lice." And that makes me laugh so much because head lice don't drop banana skins out of your hair at all.
No. Yes, I was thinking him and Psycho are sort of bottom of the list because they're less funny than the other villains, and it's a bit less clear what they're trying to do a lot of the time. But yes, there are some very funny bits with Professor Monkey for a Head.
I like his kind of arguing married couple interplay with the monkey at times, in that little red monkey story you were mentioning, where he has the woodsman say to the monkey, "I said I'd save you, must you badger me?" and things like that do make me laugh. I liked it when he was going, he hates fruit carts. Obviously the monkey loves fruits, especially banana, but Professor Monkey for a Head hates fruit carts because a stinking fruit cart killed his pa. Random and funny. I think he's well done by Charlie Adler, and I do find him quite amusing quite a lot of the time, which I don't really with Psycho. I find Professor Monkey for a Head has a better defined place in the series, and I do find him much funnier.
The main thing he does in Series 1 is that thing where these flower pattern couches appear everywhere. People sit on them and they just produce these potato chips from nowhere and sit and watch television. And I've forgotten why he's done that. But I did identify it as the first episode I saw, probably because Professor Monkey for a Head was certainly the first villain I was aware of. And it's got some very funny bits, that one, so that would explain why it appealed to me. Talking of Psycho, he's the villain or the main villain in the computer game, as you said, I think.
Psycho is voiced by Jim Cummings. as part of our double bill Jeff Bennett and Jim Cummings podcasts.
He is a crow. He's a bit of an odd-looking crow, the kind of design that, again, you wouldn't like if you wanted things to make sense. Like, he doesn't have a beak as such. He has, like, a black face with kind of teeth, but not really. He goes around with a spacesuit on at all times, and it's a yellow spacesuit. And what's he trying to do? I don't even know.
Sometimes he's working for the Queen, working with Professor Monkey for a head.
The episode in which he's the main villain that I can think of is the reason why the series one, it must be. But the series 2 one I'm thinking of, he goes off depressed, drinking a lot of coffee and turns into Hyper Psycho, having been told off by the Queen for not being able to get the super suit for her off Earthworm Jim. So it's like following on from potentially an episode in which he's tried to do something else, if you see what I mean. It's not really clear what he's trying to do or why he's a villain.
Jim Cummings gets to do some quite fun voice work as Psycho in that one, where he's extra jumpy after having the coffee. What was that? Things. But like Imhotep, he's perhaps a character who gets given to Jim Cummings who's not a great deal to do with. A bit of a filler character who's just kind of there because he was in the movie or in the computer game, and someone's felt, well, he has to be there. I think Jim Cummings gets to have a lot more fun and show his talents off a lot more in Earthworm Jim with Bob the Killer Goldfish.
So we'll talk about him next then. He lives on La Planeta de Agua.
Yeehaw!
As it always says, and probably you can't do that anymore because it's a bit racist. And it's very weird because La Planeta de Agua, we live on a Planeta de Agua ourselves, don't we? Although I think Bob's one has more water, even more water than we do, and all these other fish live in it, and he tries to do this motivational speaking to them, and they look at him completely blankly and have no intelligence at all. But the funny thing is that he doesn't live in the water. He's in a goldfish bowl at all times, and his henchman number 4 carries him around, and in a Series 1 episode, probably the first one he's in, it's revealed that numbers 1, 2 and 3 have been killed. And even if number 4 is swimming around underwater with him, he's still in the goldfish bowl, which is quite fun, really, isn't it?
Yeah. Of course, in that one, he has numbers 5, 6 and 7 doing things for him as well. It has that sequence, pot roast, worm roast, Dan Castellaneta doing a funny thick voice for that particular cat. I think it's number 7.
TV man making pot roast, so he pretend when TV man say pot, he say worm, then he's saying, I'm going to make this pot roast, worm roast. And I like quoting that sometimes, don't I, if I'm doing a recipe or something and substituting one word for another.
Yes, but Bob has a very clear goal of universal domination and tries to do it by increasing the sizes of the fish's brains on the Planeta de Agua. And making his evolution or de-evolution machine so he can suck up evolutionary energy and take over the universe by becoming the highest form of life.
It's evolution for him and de-evolution, regression for others, isn't it?
He's very different from Psycho in that way. He has a clear function and has some good episodes with it, and it's quite a lot of fun.
And he's got fewer episodes than you might think, hasn't he?
Yes.
We're always a bit surprised not to see him more than once in season 2.
They don't actually use him that much. That's right, and he has that one cameo in season 2 playing cards, so he does get a bit more screen time than Evil Jim. I think that's definitely the better role that they gave Jim Cummings there, and better use of him. I expect Bob the Killer Goldfish is my second favourite villain after Evil the Cat.
And is your third favourite then Queen Slug for a butt?
Unless it's Evil Jim, if we're counting him.
Ah, yes. But Queen Slug for a butt's good, isn't she?
Yes, it's funny.
We've talked about her quite a lot. Who's her voice?
She's called Andrea Martin.
And we've explained her, really, haven't we, whilst explaining the princess. She is the queen of Insectica, and she's a horrible tyrant, and she sometimes makes a sort of half-hearted attempt to conquer other planets, but really she wants Jim's super suit if she's trying to do anything in particular. In the Christmas one, of course, where she's the main villain, she's kidnapping Santa and getting him to go around in his magical flying sleigh and put microchips in the heads of all the children so she can take over our planet, Earth.
There's some good use of Jim Cummings in the series as Santa. I promised you a Jim Cummings podcast, so there it is.
Yes, like when she's coming to kidnap him and he's going, oh, someone's going on the naughty list, but more unexpected than that actually is when he's getting one of the elves to help Santa off with his boots, and the elf doesn't want to, and he's going,
don't cross me, boy!
And you think, good heavens, what's he going to do to him if he doesn't take off his boots? That's a hilarious episode, actually. She's trying to turn him against Christmas, and she's doing that thing, I don't know what it's even from originally, where you, force someone to watch all these videos. It's in A Clockwork Orange, isn't it?
Oh, yeah.
The original? We don't see what's on the screen, but we see him, looking, and there's all these lights, and it's going, honey, the tree's on fire.
Socks and underwear, prepare to die.
And then that's not working, so she puts him in this soundproof room, and he's sitting there, and then she opens the door, and it's blasting out this It's Christmas Day song, which makes me absolutely kill myself laughing when I'm not expecting it, which I am now, but it still makes me chuckle. And that doesn't work either, so she has to put a microchip in his head, and then they go around doing Santa's round and trying to put these microchips in the children's heads. But of course, at the very first house, Jim, Peter, and the princess manage to stop them.
That surgery scene has a couple of bits we like, doesn't it? Where Santa's going under the anaesthetic and he's going, ho, 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 ho. She says to her surgical assistant, Grand High Archbug, did you wash your hands? And he goes, I spit on them and wiped them on my pants. And she says, good enough. I kind of get the feeling it might be like that in some real-life surgeries.
Yes, the Archbug, of course, just has a couple of appearances, doesn't he? But he's very funny. And again, you can do it now because he's the official palace loony, which you can't have. It's not okay to make fun of mental illness like that, as we were saying in our Warner Bros. Podcast.
Not so fast, Earthworm Jim. Blast me, and the Archbug gets it. Jim, he's one of the bad guys.
Yes. Oh no, she's got a hostage, he says. Yes, that's another example of that sort of thing. But what does he say? The Queen's doing her aerobics and weights. She's saying, well, I feel good about myself, and that's the main thing. It says, yes, for if we cannot love ourselves, the toads of fate will feed upon our entrails.
Yes, I used to love the toads of fate.
Yes, and what are the space chickens going to do? I can't remember.
Oh, yes, that's another one.
That's in the Insectica one where he's introduced. I think he's presented as this sort of quite wise old royal advisor, and then he says something about the space chickens. Jim and Peter are like, what? And that's when the princess says the Archbug is the official palace loony.
They need him in the episode to officiate and crown the princess as the new queen and things like that. And then they make good use of him, as you may have picked up, in the Christmas one in Series 2 as well.
I think the space chickens are going to do something to them if she doesn't wear the ceremonial gown.
Oh, yeah.
Of course, a very good bit for Queen Slogfrabud is when she is ousted from Insectica by Psycho and the Professor, in fact, and so she comes to Earth and lives as a human, although she doesn't look like one, and she gets a job, and we don't know what it is to start off with, and she's saying, thanks for getting me this job, Ethel, who's a recurring character, Jim's neighbour, who lives in this sort of hillbilly trailer park, and then she turns around and opens this window, and it says complaints. She goes, all right, who's got a complaint? And she's like this massive, terrifying insect, and everyone's like, no, not me.
Sometimes if we have a complaint about something, one of us will say, oh, we'll have to tell Queen Slogfrabud about it.
Yes, what a lot of references Earthworm Jim's given us.
And in that episode, it turns out that her first name is Lucy. Also, they can build up to this one gag where her husband, the Cuban guy, comes in and goes, Lucy, you got some splaining to do. Is it really worth it? Well, maybe.
And then I think we have saved the best for last, haven't we? Evil the cat, who lives on the planet Heck, which looks kind of like hell, except it's not on fire, but it's sort of like red and stuff.
And he has, particularly in the first series, these demons who are serving him. They're sort of mouse demons, or maybe they're rats. cat's like his main underling, hench rat, and they have like tails and pitchforks and things. So it is hell, I suppose, in many ways.
And Evil the cat is Satan.
And as they say, he's evil incarnate in its purest form, the cat. And we used to think, cats aren't evil. But since we got the cat that we've had for the past 7 years, we quite agree. Cats are evil, and Evil the cat is a very accurate character.
He's voiced by Gil from Frasier.
Yes, whose name is Edward Hibbert. They got him to take over as Zazu in all the pointless Lion King follow-ups instead of Rowan Atkinson.
Yes, Frasier and Earthworm Jim are much better to boast of on his credentials. And what Evil the cat wants to do is destroy the universe, and he is always very clear about that, and he's in quite a lot of episodes, I think.
He gets 3 episodes out of 10 concentrating on him in Series 2, which is more than the other villains get. They get a couple each or 1, and he also has a cameo in Season 2 in the Evil Twin one, where Good the Cat is created, which is quite nice, so they make some very good use of Evil the Cat.
One time when we were saying, oh, look, they're starting to sort of run out of steam a bit here, is when he teams up with Malice the dog in order to do what he probably could have done just as well without her, really. It's the one where he finds out that one way to destroy the universe is to make a balloon animal of the beast that cannot speak its name, dares not speak its name, and you have to pop it with the hat pin of Destiny, and then the beast will appear and destroy the universe. And for that, Malice the dog has joined him, and there's this whole thing where hench rat's like jealous and stuff that she's getting all the attention from Evil, and it follows this established formula with the addition of Malice the dog, where he finds out that there's a thing that you can use to destroy the universe, and that Earthworm Jim has it in his home, and he goes and knocks on the door in disguise as a poor little orphan and a sweet little old lady collecting charity and things like that in order to try and get it, which can be very amusing. Well, I don't think he really bothers with Malice the dog. She comes and kind of spoils that aspect.
Yes, I was expecting him to dress up like he did in Season 1 and con the hat pin out of Jim, and he doesn't actually do it in that episode. It was actually Season 1 only. I was really disappointed with that.
He does it for the snow globe, which also releases a beast that is supposed to destroy the universe, and the pop-up book, which is called Fuzzy Wuzzy's Animal something or other, and it has the Pudgy Wudgy Hippo, and it also has a page that tells you how to destroy the universe, and having played with the pop-up Pudgy Wudgy Hippo, Jim turns to that page where it's got all like this evil writing and sinister music plays and stuff, and he goes, I still don't think this one is funny. And I was absolutely kidding myself laughing at the flashback, wasn't I, to when the book was being printed, and it's this thick, stupid apprentice, which again you couldn't do nowadays.
Some better use of Jim Cummings there as well. Why does my foot hurt when I run the printing press?
And he's got it jammed in the, like, cogs. And yes, the master printer is telling him to print the Fuzzy Wuzzy Animals book, and he says, do not of error print this page wherein lies the secret to destroy the universe, or something like that. And it's very funny because why would he have that? Why would he put it somewhere that the stupid apprentice might print it? But it doesn't matter, it's just funny.
Again, it's just random and funny, and something that viewers of Nicktoons in the 21st century obviously can't engage with.
And then what does it tell you to do? It tells you to go to the planet of the reeking beasts and show them a fondue fork. And Evil the cat is doing this, and Jim goes, of course! That's how you destroy the universe. You get the reeking beasts to see a fondue fork. Putting it in those very bold terms makes it sound probably even a bit stupider than it is. When they see the fondue fork, they make a noise that will destroy the universe. And they're like sort of yaks, aren't they?
One of them has poor eyesight and can't recognise the fondue fork. Sounds rather like Buster Bunny. Or Tex Hex, really, more than Buster Bunny. And that spoils Evil's whole plan. Random and funny. Perhaps we couldn't do that nowadays, make fun of someone with funny eyesight.
Yes, and it's got like these really thick glasses on, so we'll get what's going on.
Oh, what is that? Oh, it's never a fondue fork.
Yes, and of course, all the reeking beasts, every single one, have to make a noise to destroy the universe. universe.
We mentioned each of us Henchrat, and what's worth also saying about him is that he's voiced by John Cassier. And if you think back to the Warner Brothers podcast this time last year, you'll know why I say I expect John Cassier and Charlie Adler got together and had an argument about who's the better Buster Bunny when they were recording Earthworm Jim together.
And I think that's all the characters. I mean, there are a couple of recurring ones like Johnny Dactyl and the Hamsternator, who are other superheroes who pop up from time to time. No one really worth talking about, I don't think.
They are funny, some of those other superheroes. Low back pain man, where always quoting, "I'll be okay in a minute." That's Jim Cummings as well. And we always laugh about the warthog and the eggplant who live together, and the warthog is in eternal servitude feeding chickpeas to this talking eggplant. Chickpeas, blast you, we sometimes say.
And then the warthog holds up this sign saying, "Help me."
Lots of great fun, random humour like that.
Yes, the lead-in is something like, do you ever think it's weird, a giant worm and a talking puppy living together? And Peter says, not really. There's a talking eggplant down the street who lives with a warthog, or maybe it's the other way round. And then we get to see this eggplant and warthog, and it's so bizarre, and it's very funny.
Most times when we've recorded a podcast, and then an hour or so later we come back and say, "Oh, I can't believe we didn't mention this, that, or the other. Oh, well, never mind, we said pretty much all we wanted to say." But one thing I think it would be a shame to end up saying that about would be the cow.
Oh, yes! So, like, what happens is at the end of every episode, in some way, this cow falls down from the sky and squashes usually Jim. Initially, I think it's always Jim, and then after a while, it happens to Cypro in that coffee episode and a couple of other people, and it goes moo and that kind of thing. And in series 2, they start sort of messing about with that a bit, don't they? They have an evil cow, they have a cowfish in that book, Kill a Goldfish one.
And then it's in a fruit cake in the Christmas episode, and it's a giant cow at one point. But that, of course, is homage to the computer game. It's random and funny on its own. A cow falls down at the end of every episode. But apparently there's a level in one of the computer games where you launch a cow at the beginning and it falls on you at the end of the level.
Oh, I see. Does that help?
I think it's just a random joke at the end. Like, oh, you've completed the level. Oh dear. Squashed by a cow.
So it makes a certain amount of sense in the computer game,
Yes.
even if it's not helpful, and then it's not at all.
Because you know where it's come from in the computer game, but then in the series it just
Makes
falls,
no sense.
just falls down like the Monty Python foot. If you join us again on the final Sunday in February, you'll finally get to hear our podcast on Count Duckula, and other Cosgrove Hall productions will also be mentioned briefly. It will chiefly be about Count Duckula, which is the one we know and have watched and like best, really, in most ways, if not all ways. I probably originally thought we would do a Count Duckula podcast a lot earlier than we're actually going to do it, a couple of years ago when we started this, as should be very obvious if you know us and our little catchphrases, but more details about that next time.
So, how apt. Now I have to say, good night out there.
Whatever you are.